the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Richmond.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I'm very pleased to be speaking on this motion today to highlight how devastating the Liberals and Nationals' cruel and unfair cashless debit card was on so many communities right across the nation, and in fact why we got rid of it. And of course, yet despite it being abolished, this actual motion contains the Coalition's plans to reinstate the cashless debit card and, as we know, roll it out right across the country. We know that was their agenda originally. They wanted to extend it to all pensioners, to all of those people on income support, including those on aged pensions. We know that is their agenda. The fact is the cashless debit card was wrong and destructive, and we went to the election last year with a commitment to abolish the card, and that is exactly what we have delivered. Now, the cashless debit card was just an ideological obsession by those opposite. It was not a policy supported by evidence. It was the Liberals and Nationals' obsession with privatised welfare. And they knew all along there was no evidence, there was no data that the card actually worked, but they kept it in place and they actually wanted to extend it. I've previously outlined many instances where people's lives were actually destroyed by being forced onto the card, how it stigmatised them and made their lives incredibly difficult. They could only use the card at certain restricted locations. It was often declined. People couldn't buy basic food or groceries. Many people were unable to pay their rent. They were forced into bankruptcy. Many unable to make car repayments. They weren't able to buy school uniforms for their children. The fact is the cashless debit card stripped away many people's rights and, in many cases, their dignity. And I've outlined many cases to the House, including Karen, a mother of 5, who said it was a nightmare being on the card and she was unable to provide for her children. Or the case of Jocelyn, who at 65 years of age and on a disability pension was forced onto the cashless welfare card just because of where she lived. She'd always managed her own finances and was very much worse off because of the card. Well, we said enough was enough, and we called time on the punitive cashless debit card because our approach has always been to fund things that actually make a difference. And of course, our October budget allocated $217 million to abolish the cashless debit card program and fund support services. And $158 million, over 70% of this funding, will be used to support services to people in those cashless debit card communities. And I'll remind those opposite, this is funding for services they failed to provide for those communities. We've extended those support services and are funding new ones because we've been told these are the services that will actually make a difference to those communities. We understand how important it is. Now, there has never been any evidence to show the cashless debit card actually work. That's the reality of it. No data or no evidence. And there were a lot of evaluations, inquiries and audits that have repeatedly shown that the card just did not work. In particular, the Australian National Audit Office released its performance of the card in 2012, highlighting once more the lack of evidence to demonstrate any success at all. And despite this message being delivered twice, the ANO's first report in 2018, the second one in June 2022, the former government refused to listen again and again. And it tells you everything you need to know about those opposite, what they think of the disadvantaged and most vulnerable people in our community. They completely ignored all of the evidence from all of those many reports. Now, as I've said, we know the Liberals and Nationals are obsessed with their idea of privatised welfare. They're obsessed with this idea of this cruel and punitive cashless debit card. And they're not interested in addressing the real issues that Australians are concerned about. They're only committed to reinstating the cashless debit card. They've said that so many times. And we also know, we do know they had secret plans to expand the card if they actually were successful at the election. And we know this through many means, but particularly we know it through the very excellent reporting by Nikki Sava in her book Bulldozed. She quotes there were 3 policies agreed to by Morrison's Expenditure Review Committee ahead of the budget. The first was to expand the cashless debit card. There it was in writing, and we've seen other ones. Yeah, that's right. They kept that decision secret. When they were asked many times about the expansion, they kept it secret. But we know that was their plan, and if they were back in government, that's precisely what they would do. Bring it back in, expand it to all income recipients and pensions, including those on aged care pensions. This card has been incredibly destructive, and the fact is privatised welfare does not work. And nothing highlights that more than the disaster of the cashless debit card. So many people told us, hundreds of them told us how it devastated their lives and took away their dignity. Well, we acted and we got rid of the cashless debit card because we listened to communities and provided support for those that needed it most.